"You boys don't belong here." The words landed like a slap in the quiet luxury of first class. Ethan froze mid-step, his boarding pass trembling in his hand. Elijah's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. The whole cabin was watching. The flight attendant's smile stayed painted on sharp as glass. "Why don't you wait back there while we confirm her radio crackled?" Phones lifted, whispers spread. No one stood up for them. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the boys she just humiliated were heirs to the very company that built the plane they were flying on. And the world was about to see what justice looks like in real time. Ethan adjusted the strap on his backpack as he and his twin brother Elijah stepped into the first-class cabin of Flight 612 bound for Chicago. The lighting was warm, almost theatrical, casting a soft golden glow over the plush leather seats. Passengers were already settling in. Briefcases in overhead bins, noise-canceling headphones, adjusted sparkling water sipped casually. The boys, both dressed in navy polos and khaki pants, moved with quiet confidence as they approached seats 2A and 2B. "Hi there," the flight attendant said, appearing almost out of nowhere. Her name tag read Cheryl Gates, and her teeth showed in what could only generously be called a smile. "Are you two lost?" Ethan offered his ticket. "We're in 2A and 2B. "Oh, are you now?" Cheryl tilted her head, the fake smile still plastered on her face. She didn't take the ticket. Instead, she looked past it, scanning the cabin. "No parent with you?" "No, ma'am," Elijah replied. "We travel alone often." She chuckled, not kindly. That's brave." The word hung in the air like a coded warning. Elijah shifted uncomfortably. "We're used to it." The nearby passengers had begun to pay attention. A woman in pearls looked up from her tablet. A man in a gray suit raised his eyebrow, a few rows back. A white-haired gentleman in 3D leaned toward the woman beside him and whispered audibly, "They don't look like they belong here." Ethan's ears caught the words, but his face gave away nothing. Elijah, however, flinched. "We'll just take our seats," Ethan said politely, stepping toward 2A. Cheryl moved, not blocking them exactly, but enough to assert herself. "Hang on a sec," she said, her tone shifting ever so slightly. She pulled a small radio from her belt and turned away from them. "We may have a problem in first," she whispered into the device, shielding her mouth from view, but not from sound. Ethan glanced at Elijah, who nodded almost imperceptibly. This wasn't their first time being treated like this, but it had never happened with so many eyes watching. The cabin had fallen into a strange silence, the kind that wraps around discomfort like a fog. Cheryl turned back around, smile restored. "Why don't you boys wait right here a moment while we double-check a few things?" "We have our boarding passes," Elijah said this time, holding his out directly. Cheryl didn't take it. "Oh, I'm sure you do. But sometimes there are glitches in the system. We wouldn't want you to sit in someone else's seat by mistake." "We were assigned these seats," Ethan repeated calmly. "I'm not saying you're lying," she said. Voice pitched a bit louder now, clearly addressing the cabin as much as the boys. "It's just that sometimes errors happen, and we need to make sure everyone is where they should be." The implication lingered in the air like smoke. A man from seat 1C cleared his throat, uncomfortable but silent. "I don't think we're the error," Elijah murmured. The radio on Cheryl's hip crackled. "Gate manager en route," a voice said. "Great," she replied cheerfully, ignoring the tension building around her. Another flight attendant, younger and seemingly junior, approached with a clipboard. She glanced at the boys, then at Cheryl. "Everything all right?" "All good," Cheryl chirped. "Just checking tickets for these two gentlemen." The junior attendant looked uneasy, but said nothing. The silence in the cabin became pressure. The unspoken question hung over every row. What are those boys doing here? Ethan opened his backpack slowly and removed his boarding pass, placing it on the armrest of his assigned seat. The name Ethan Holland was printed clearly alongside seat 2A first class. Elijah did the same for 2B. Look, Ethan said softly, we don't want to cause a scene. We just want to sit where we're assigned. Cheryl looked at the boarding passes, then back at the boys, then at the boarding passes again. Her eyes narrowed. You sure these aren't printouts? You know anyone can make something like this at home. That's an accusation, Elijah said. It's a concern, she snapped back. The tension spiked. Phones began to appear, subtly held low-angled toward the unfolding situation. The unspoken rule of modern conflict. If it's not filmed, it never happened. And just like that, the atmosphere in the cabin had shifted from polite to hostile. Young men, a new voice called out from behind them. A man in a suit approached, clipboard in hand. Ron Walters, gate supervisor. His presence was not reassuring. Problem here, he asked, though it was clear whose side he'd already taken. They're in seats 2A and 2B with questionable boarding passes, Cheryl said immediately. We're not questioning the system, Elijah interjected. You are? Ron didn't even glance at the documents. Boys, come with me. We'll get this sorted out outside the cabin. We're not going anywhere, Ethan said, a quiet firmness entering his voice. Ron raised an eyebrow. Excuse me, we've done nothing wrong. We boarded legally. We're in our assigned seats. Ron leaned in closer. I don't care what you think you're assigned. Either you move now, or we'll have security handle it. Ethan looked around the cabin. Still no one spoke up. No one offered support. Only eyes curious, wary, complicit. The silence was more brutal than any insult. He sat down slowly in seat 2A. Elijah followed suit. Ron stood still for a moment, blinking, unsure what to do with defiance this calm. You've made your choice, he muttered, and turned toward the jet bridge. Security will be here shortly. As he disappeared from view, Cheryl exhaled through her nose like a bull ready to charge. Enjoy your seats while they last, she muttered under her breath. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, centering himself. Elijah reached into his pocket and unlocked his phone. The live stream button was just a thumb press away. Elijah's thumb hovered over the Go Live button as he debated whether it was time. Ethan gave a slight shake of the head. Not yet, he whispered. Let's give them one more chance to do the right thing. The tension in the cabin hadn't faded. In fact, it had thickened. Cheryl was standing stiffly near the galley, arms folded, eyes locked on the twins, like they were suspicious luggage left unattended. She kept glancing toward the entrance of the plane, waiting for Ron Walters to return with backup. Ethan leaned back in his seat, trying to appear calm, but his pulse was hammering. He looked down at his neatly printed boarding pass again. Seat 2A, First Class Ethan Holland. Everything was correct, everything was legal, and yet everything felt precarious. Elijah, seated beside him, pulled his matching boarding pass from his pocket and laid it flat on his tray table. Then he reached into the front pocket of his carry-on and pulled out a manila folder. Inside were printed confirmations receipts, even an itinerary with the corporate logo of Holland Aerospace Systems watermarked faintly in the background. Cheryl returned to them with forced politeness and a too bright tone. I spoke to the system tech downstairs. Seems like there may be a system sync error between check-in and boarding. Happens sometimes. She gestured vaguely. Nothing personal. Ethan raised an eyebrow. So you believe these seats aren't assigned to us because of a glitch? Exactly, she said with exaggerated relief, as though that solved everything. But we have proof. Tickets, receipts, confirmation codes. Shouldn't that settle it? Elijah asked, opening the folder slowly so she could see the documents inside. Cheryl's smile faltered for half a second before she snapped back into her performance. I'm not authorized to validate boarding records. That's up to the gate supervisor. You mean the man who just threatened to remove us without checking anything? Ethan asked dryly. Cheryl blinked. He's the proper authority in this situation. Let's let him handle it, shall we? Just then, Ron Walters stepped back into the cabin, followed by a younger gate agent who looked as though she would rather be anywhere else. Ron's tie was slightly askew, his expression set in hard determination. "Any updates?" he asked Cheryl, ignoring the boys completely. Still showing mismatch, Cheryl replied smoothly. Ron looked at the twins with open skepticism, then without a word gestured to the younger agent. "Go pull the seat map and see who's officially in 2A and 2B. The young agent nodded and walked briskly toward the flight deck. Ron turned to the boys. "Until we verify everything, I'm asking you to relocate to Coach." "On what grounds?" Elijah asked. "You're not entitled to sit in first class until your tickets are confirmed through our internal systems." Ethan stood up slowly and opened the manila folder, holding it out like evidence. "Sir, with all due respect, this confirms our purchase down to the last detail. If there's a problem, it's not on our end." Ron didn't take the folder. He simply looked at them and repeated, "Coach." The air shifted again. From across the aisle, a woman in a dark blazer and pearls sitting in seat 3B cleared her throat. She appeared to be in her late 40s with sharp features and an assertive tone. "Excuse me," she said. All heads turned. She spoke calmly, but with presence. "I don't know what's happening here, but I watched these boys board with valid tickets. They are polite, composed, and clearly prepared. It seems to me they've done everything right." For a brief moment, relief spread across Ethan's face. Someone was speaking up. Someone in their corner. The woman continued. That said, and here her tone shifted, sharpened. "I also understand how difficult airline systems can be. If there's a glitch, staff are just doing their jobs. I trust they'll sort it out professionally." Elijah blinked. "What?" Cheryl smiled. Ron folded his arms. The woman gave a quick, polite nod and returned to her tablet. It was a gut punch, the kind that didn't scream but whispered, "We see what's happening, but we won't stand in its way." Ethan sat down again, the folder still in his hand. Elijah looked out the window, jaw clenched. The younger gate agent returned with a printout. She handed it to Ron, who scanned it briefly. "System shows first class for 2 passengers, Ethan and Elijah Holland," she said quickly, as though it burned her mouth. Ron's jaw tensed. "They're cleared," she added, 100%. "It was synced late for mobile check-in. No system glitch, just delayed update." Ron didn't apologize, didn't look at them, just nodded and turned back toward the jet bridge. Cheryl stood frozen. Then, as if deciding the moment had passed, she adjusted her scarf and walked toward the galley without a word. The woman in 3B didn't look up. No one clapped, no one cheered. It wasn't that kind of victory, it was silent. Cold. Ethan slowly exhaled. Elijah leaned over and whispered, "That woman almost had me fooled." "I think she had herself fooled," Ethan replied. A new attendant appeared briefly to offer them bottled water. She didn't speak either, just set the bottles down and disappeared as quickly as she came. Elijah reached for his phone again. This time Ethan nodded. "Start it." Elijah pressed the red button. A notification popped up. "You are now live." And in an instant, the lens of his phone became a witness to everything. "Hey, y'all," he said, keeping his voice low. "We're on Flight 612 to Chicago, and yeah, something's happening again." The image was stable. His tone calm, but his eyes were hard. The kind of hard that comes from being polite for too long. The kind that made viewers pause mid-scroll. "I know I look relaxed, but this is real," Elijah said to the screen. "We were told our first-class seats might be a glitch even after showing printed receipts, confirmations, boarding passes twice." He flipped the phone subtly, capturing Cheryl standing stiffly at the front of the cabin, checking her hair in the reflective oven door like nothing had happened. Ethan sat beside him, eyes forward, still silent. The view count began ticking upward. 31:58, 1:13. Within a minute, over 400. Comments started rolling in. "What's going on? This racism stuff still happening in 2025. They look like they belong more than half the folks on here." Elijah stayed focused. "They're saying we may need to move to Coach even though the system confirmed we're in the right seats. I know it seems small, but this is what it looks like when people assume you don't belong." His voice trembled slightly on that last word. Belong. And he looked away toward the small window. A reflection stared back at him, his face the same face from 5 years ago. And just like that, the memory hit. It was a different airport, a different flight, and they were only 11 years old. Ethan had begged the flight attendant, politely clutching a tiny aviation pin their dad had given them. "Can we see the cockpit after the flight?" The flight attendant smiled at the white boy standing behind them. Of course, Honey just asked the captain after landing. But when Elijah asked the same question a few moments later, she paused. "The cockpit is a secure area. We only allow special guests up there." Ethan blinked. "But you just—" "I'm sorry," she cut in, voice sweet but final. "Maybe next time." Elijah had nodded and stepped back. But that wasn't what burned. It was the look she gave their clothes. Simple jeans, Target backpacks, no designer logos. It was the moment Ethan overheard her whisper to a coworker. "They don't look like they're from a flying family." They had held it in until baggage claim. Elijah didn't cry, but his fists had stayed clenched all the way home. Later that night, their dad sat them down. "You'll walk into rooms and people will think you snuck in. That's not your burden to carry, but it is your responsibility to stay calm and document everything." Facts beat fury. Back in the cabin, Elijah blinked away the memory and turned the camera on himself again. "I don't know what you do in this situation, but I'm tired of being told to move to wait to prove we belong." The comments exploded. "You're handling this with class. Tagging at Skyline Air now. Where's the captain? Let him explain this." Then the viewer count hit 1,000 in under 6 minutes. A ripple moved through the cabin. A tall man in a neon yellow vest stepped into first class. His badge read L. Chambers, Airport Operations. He had a clipboard and the weary look of someone who'd spent too many years smoothing over corporate mistakes. Cheryl perked up. "Thank God," she muttered under her breath. Elijah angled the phone just enough to catch him on the stream. His audience watched closely. "Can I help you?" Ethan asked. "I was asked to come verify something," Chambers said, eyes darting between the twins and Cheryl. Apparently there was confusion about seating. "It's resolved," Ethan replied, nodding toward the younger gate agent who had printed the manifest earlier. "System confirmed our seats." Chambers hesitated. "Can I see your boarding passes?" Ethan handed his over without a word. Elijah followed. Chambers read the names, the seat numbers, the confirmation codes. His eyebrows rose slightly. "Holland," he murmured. He looked up again, longer this time. There was recognition in his eyes. Not just recognition, awareness. "You related to an Anthony Holland?" Ethan nodded once. "That's our father." Chambers froze. The name had clearly registered. He stepped back, rereading the passes. Then he looked towards Cheryl, who immediately averted her gaze. A heavy silence followed. He cleared his throat. "All right, looks like everything's in order here. You know who our father is, don't you?" Elijah asked, his voice careful. Chambers hesitated again, then said quietly, "Yes, I do." He turned toward Cheryl. "If these passengers are confirmed, there's nothing further to address. I'll note that for the report." He tapped his clipboard and walked out without another word. The camera caught all of it. He knew. He knew. Why didn't he say something, coward? Just like the system. Imagine needing power to be treated fairly. Ethan glanced at Elijah, voice low. "He could have shut this down right there." "Yeah," Elijah murmured. But he didn't want to get involved. More comments flooded in. "This needs to go viral. The calm in these kids is unreal." I'd be screaming by now. The count was now 2,600. Local reporters were quietly joining the live, screenshots already being shared to Twitter and Instagram. Elijah looked back at the camera. "We're not asking for sympathy," he said. "We're just showing you what it looks like. It's 2025, and we're still treated like intruders." The image lingered on his face for a beat longer. Steady, proud, weary. Then the feed cut, not from his end, from the airlines. The plane Wi-Fi had just gone dark. The cabin buzzed with a strange stillness like a theater just before the curtains rise. The Wi-Fi had dropped. Elijah's live stream was cut, and for a moment the noise from the outside world went silent. No comments, no viewers, no witnesses. That was when Officer Moore stepped into first class. He was tall, stocky, and moved like someone used to being obeyed without question. His dark blue uniform was pressed, his badge gleaming under the cabin lights. He didn't smile. He didn't introduce himself. He simply scanned the seats until his eyes landed on Ethan and Elijah. "Gentlemen," he said with a cold nod. "Time to come with me." Ethan's jaw tightened. Elijah looked up calmly. "On what grounds?" "There's been a dispute over your seating," Moore replied. "The flight crew has requested your removal." "I'm here to assist," requested, Ethan repeated. "So not based on any law or evidence." Moore's expression didn't change. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." He took a step closer. Ethan turned his head just slightly toward his brother. "Call Dad." Elijah gave a tiny nod. Then slowly he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He pretended to fumble with it, then let it slip from his hand. The phone hit the carpeted floor with a muffled thud. The screen didn't crack. The camera lens was still facing upward, still recording, though no longer live streaming, just recording. Moore didn't notice. Or maybe he did. But he didn't care. He pulled out a small set of zip tie restraints and let them hang loosely between his fingers. The message was clear. "This your idea of de-escalation?" Ethan asked, voice level. "You don't want to ask for ID, confirm our boarding passes." "I was told you refused a lawful order," Moore said flatly. "You want to take that up with airport security after we deboard you? You're welcome to." Elijah's hand was already reaching for the backup phone in his backpack, but that's when something shifted. Moore's eyes locked on the folder still resting on Ethan's lap, the one with the Holland Aerospace watermark faintly visible in the corner. His face twitched. "Holland," he said slowly. Ethan didn't answer. "Anthony Holland," Moore added, voice lower. "That your father?" Neither brother spoke. Moore gave a sharp, bitter laugh. "Of course he sends his boys in first class." Figures. Something about his tone changed. The air grew colder. "I used to work for Holland Aerospace," Moore said, stepping closer now, voice low enough that only they could hear. 10 years senior operations liaison. You know what I got in return? Downsized. No pension. Just a slip in a signature from your dad." So that was it. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "So this is personal," no more said, but the word was laced with venom. "This is procedure." Elijah spoke for the first time. "You think roughing us up is going to get your job back? I think," Moore said, leaning in, "that people like your father don't get to play God and then hide behind kids when things go wrong." Twist delivered. Ethan realized then that this wasn't just another official doing his job poorly. This was targeted precise, a personal vendetta dressed in a uniform. "Sir," Ethan said, clearly voice projecting so the camera below could pick up every word, "are you refusing to verify our identity and ticket information before proceeding with physical removal? I'm not here to argue legalities. Are you refusing to follow protocol?" Moore's jaw clenched. "You're stalling." "No," Elijah said. "We're protecting ourselves." Then came Cheryl's voice, loud and performative. "Officer, if they're refusing to cooperate, I suggest you move them immediately. We've already been delayed long enough." Ron Walters reappeared behind Moore, arms crossed, face smug. "You have permission to remove them," he said. Moore moved. Elijah instinctively placed a hand on Ethan's forearm. "Wait!" Moore reached down. The phone, still on the floor, blinked with a small red light. Recording. Ethan stood up slowly. "We'll come with you, but you'll regret this." "That a threat?" Moore asked, eyes flashing. "No," Ethan said. "A promise." As Moore took hold of Ethan's wrist, a voice barked from behind the curtain of the galley. "Officer Moore, stand down!" Everyone froze. A second officer entered, female, younger, her uniform crisp, her demeanor professional. She had a tablet in one hand and a body cam visibly clipped to her vest. "Supervisor's orders," she added. "New intel came in." "What intel?" Moore asked, not letting go. "Passenger ID verified, confirmed first-class seats. Full documentation provided to command. We're reviewing a potential discrimination incident." Moore's face twisted. "You're kidding." "No, sir." He looked at the boys again, and for the first time doubt flickered in his eyes. "You were being watched the whole time," Elijah said quietly. Even when the live stream ended, Moore let go. Ethan sat back down. Ron said nothing. Cheryl disappeared into the galley again. The second officer knelt to pick up the fallen phone. She handed it back to Elijah with a subtle nod. "I'd recommend keeping this with you," she said. Elijah took it, locking eyes with her. "Thanks." The moment passed, but the damage had been done. The moment Ethan sat back down, his phone buzzed in his lap. Dad Mobile, Elijah saw it too, flashing on the lock screen. Their father was calling again. "Answer it," Ethan whispered, voice low. "Now." Elijah slid his thumb across the screen and raised the phone to his ear. But before he could even say hello, a firm hand reached over and pressed the phone down. "Not now," Officer Moore said. "This is not the time for personal calls." Elijah's mouth hung open for a second. "It's not personal. It's our guardian." Moore ignored him. He pressed the screen, ending the call. The cabin watched, caught in a frozen silence. Ethan's face went still. It wasn't anger, not anymore. It was beyond that. The look of someone filing away a moment they knew would cost someone their job. Moore straightened up, turned toward Ron, and gave a tight nod. "We need a clean cabin. Let's cut connectivity and secure this situation before it escalates further." Ron didn't even flinch. He reached for his radio. This is Gate 12 Supervisor. Execute blackout on Wi-Fi and local signal boost security protocol 6. The reply crackled through the radio. Confirmed. Within seconds, the small Wi-Fi icon on every device in first class disappeared. Dead. Elijah looked at his phone. No service, no bars, no Wi-Fi. He looked at Ethan. "They're shutting it down." "I know," Ethan replied. "It's panic mode." Cheryl strolled back into the aisle, now smirking. "Let's see how well your little audience handles radio silence." Elijah reached into his bag and pulled out a backup battery pack, plugging it into his phone like a soldier preparing for a siege. "I don't need a crowd," he said. "Just the truth." Ron turned toward the passengers. "We appreciate your patience. There's been a minor system delay, but we're working to ensure a smooth flight." No one clapped. No one smiled. The lie hung in the air, stale and clumsy. Then something unexpected happened. A flight attendant neither boy had paid much attention to earlier. Slight mid-30s hair pulled tightly into a bun, approached them quietly. She had been the one pouring water earlier, the quiet one. She leaned down between them and whispered, "I don't agree with how this is being handled." Elijah looked up sharply. "Then say something." "I can't," she said softly, glancing over her shoulder toward Cheryl and Ron. "But I can help." She reached into her blazer pocket, pulled out a slim personal phone, and slid it beneath Elijah's tray table. "Hotspot's on," she whispered. "Password is dignity first. Share it fast." Then she walked away like nothing had happened. Elijah blinked, stunned. "Did that just happen?" Ethan whispered. Elijah was already typing. He connected his phone to the personal hotspot. Within seconds, the Wi-Fi symbol returned. Then the TikTok app reconnected. Notifications flooded in like a burst dam. "Where did you go?" "We lost the stream." "Come back. Update us." "What's happening?" Viewers were still waiting. Elijah opened the camera, hit live again, and the screen glowed red. "We're back," he said, steady and firm. They cut the signal, but we're still here. The view count rebounded instantly. 300, 500, 200. Ethan leaned closer to the mic. They tried to shut us up. They cut the call from our dad, cut the Wi-Fi, but this isn't 1998. We know how to survive. Cheryl noticed the faint glow of the camera and stepped toward them. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "Streaming," Elijah replied, voice calm. "For documentation purposes, this is a federal aircraft," she snapped. "You can't record. You stopped being worried about protocol when you tried to kick us out of our paid seats," Ethan said flatly. Ron overheard and walked back up the aisle. "Is there a problem?" "No, sir," Elijah said smoothly. "We're just updating family about what's happening. You know, since you cut off communication." Ron's eyes flicked to the camera. The red light stared back at him like a silent witness. He turned to Cheryl. "You said they were off the grid?" "They were," she said through gritted teeth. Ron cut her off. "Doesn't matter now. We'll deal with it later." From across the cabin, the quiet flight attendant returned to her station and resumed pouring beverages. Her eyes didn't meet theirs, but her message had already been delivered. Elijah turned the camera back to his face. "This is what happens when systems try to silence people," he said. "But there's always someone watching, always someone willing to help, even if they're quiet." The comments came flooding in. "Whoever gave them the hotspot is a hero. We see you. Keep going. Y'all are changing the game." The view count crossed 3,000. Ethan looked out the window at the tarmac at the sunlight glinting off another jet. He said quietly, "Let's make this count." And with the silent help of one ally, they did. The red glow of the live stream pulsed like a heartbeat in Elijah's hand. Over 3,000 viewers were watching now, sharing, commenting, tagging media outlets. And somewhere in a quiet house just outside Washington, D.C., a man named Franklin Shaw sat upright in his recliner eyes, locked on the screen. He hadn't worked for the Federal Aviation Administration in over 6 years, but some habits never died. When he saw the badge of Officer Moore, when he heard the term Protocol 6, and when he watched 2 calm, well-spoken black teens being surrounded for daring to sit in the seats they had paid for, his instincts kicked in. He didn't wait. He clipped the live stream. Then he texted his former colleagues, "Skyline flight live now. Huge discrimination issue. Violates multiple FAA regs. Watch now." Within minutes, the video was circulating in internal FAA group chats and media DMs. Back on the plane, tension had risen to a crescendo. Officer Moore returned, now flanked by 2 additional airport security officers. He was holding something new in his hand. Black zip-tie restraints. Passengers noticed, eyebrows lifted, murmurs began. Elijah raised the phone slightly, capturing the moment, as Moore made his way down the aisle. "Sir," Ethan said, still seated, voice steady, "are you intending to restrain me without any formal charges or justification?" "You've failed to comply with crew directives," Moore said low and firm. "We've been polite. We've remained seated. We've followed all legal orders," Ethan encountered. "Is that a crime? You're obstructing the flight by sitting in the seat printed on my ticket," Elijah interjected. Moore raised the zip ties. "Final warning." A woman gasped softly in the row ahead. A man stood up halfway as if to speak, then sat back down, eyes darting. Elijah turned the phone to face Moore. "Over 4,000 people are watching this right now," he said. "Think about what you're doing." Moore didn't blink. He reached forward. Then a new voice cut through the cabin. "I'm going to have to ask you to stop, officer." It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry, but it held power. Everyone turned. A man in a gray suit stood up from seat 2C. He was in his early 50s, salt and pepper beard, calm eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. A briefcase rested at his feet. He stepped into the aisle between Moore and the twins. "And you are more challenged." "Mitchell Grayson," the man replied, pulling a slim leather wallet from his inner jacket. "Chief Legal Counsel, Holland Aerospace Systems." A collective breath was sucked out of the cabin. Even Cheryl froze mid-step. Moore's hand dropped half an inch. "I'd advise you to reconsider your next move," Grayson continued. "These boys are the sons of Dr. Anthony Holland. Their tickets were purchased through our internal travel system, processed through corporate accounts, and logged with FAA oversight due to our security protocols." Moore's face shifted. "I have documentation on my work-issued tablet if needed." But more importantly, Grayson added, his voice rising just enough this is being live-reamed to a rapidly growing national audience, including, I might add, our legal compliance division and external partners. He turned to Ron Walters. "Gate Supervisor Walters, you're aware that forcibly removing minors with verified first-class boarding passes could constitute both civil rights violations and FAA regulation breaches, correct?" Ron swallowed but said nothing. Grayson looked back at Moore. "I don't want to escalate this further, but if you proceed with restraints, I will immediately initiate emergency legal proceedings with the Department of Transportation and file an injunction against Skyline Airlines by close of business today." Ethan exhaled for the first time in what felt like forever. Elijah lowered the phone slightly, letting the comments catch up to the moment. "Whoa, legal counsel! That man just bodied the entire airline." Thank God someone stood up. "Let's go." The count jumped again. 300 viewers. Moore's hand lowered completely. He stepped back. "This isn't over," he muttered. "It's over when you stop treating teenagers like criminals," Grayson replied evenly. Then for the first time, Grayson turned toward the twins and gave a slight respectful nod. "You've handled this with remarkable composure. Your father would be proud." Ethan nodded, stunned. Elijah managed to whisper, "Thank you, sir." Grayson sat back down, opened his tablet, and began typing notes. Ron turned without a word and marched back toward the jet bridge. Cheryl stood awkwardly near the galley, avoiding everyone's eyes. Officer Moore retreated to the front of the cabin radio, crackling at his hip. Silence returned, but this time it was laced with electricity. Ethan turned to Elijah. "Did that just happen?" "Legal cavalry," Elijah muttered. "On aisle 2, they both laughed. "Just a little. Just enough to shake off the weight pressing down on their chests." Then Elijah turned the phone back to his face. "For everyone watching," he said, "you just saw what it looks like when power is used the right way. Not to intimidate, but to protect." The comments poured in. "I'm crying. That lawyer deserves a raise. Protect these boys at all costs." This moment was the one that would go viral. The moment the avalanche truly began. The silence in the cabin felt unnatural, like something sacred had just passed through and left the air thin. No one dared speak after Mitchell Grayson. Holland Aerospace's legal counsel had stopped Officer Moore with nothing but calm authority and decades of legal power. But as the moment settled, Ethan's phone buzzed again. Dad Mobile Elijah leaned toward him. "Do it." Ethan didn't hesitate. He pressed accept, then tapped the speakerphone icon. The red live stream light was still glowing from Elijah's phone. A voice deep, deliberate, and unmistakably authoritative filled the cabin. "Ethan, Elijah, are you safe?" Passengers turned in their seats. Even Cheryl paused mid-step. "We're okay, Dad," Ethan replied. It got tense. "Define tense," the voice of Dr. Anthony Holland said. "I've received 4 separate calls from FAA compliance officers in the last 30 minutes. One of them sent me a clip of an officer reaching for restraints." Elijah cut in. "They cut the Wi-Fi, tried to remove us without checking anything. Someone helped us reconnect." "Who?" Dr. Holland asked sharply. "We don't know." "A flight attendant gave us a hotspot," Elijah said. "She's not part of the problem." There was a pause. Then his voice shifted deeper, slower, a warning cloaked in civility. "Put me on full speaker now." Ethan turned up the volume. The entire cabin heard the next words. This is Dr. Anthony Holland. My sons are passengers aboard Skyline Airlines Flight 612. They are seated in first class. Tickets paid through corporate channels. Confirmed and verified. He paused, then said it. The sentence that would become the quote heard around the industry. My sons are in danger because your people made assumptions. The cabin tensed. No one moved. Even more froze in place near the galley. Dr. Holland continued, his voice measured but razor-sharp. I am currently on a conference call with the Secretary of Transportation and the FAA's Civil Rights Division. This call is being recorded on both sides, as is customary for all conversations involving regulatory investigations. You may proceed carefully. Elijah's eyes widened. Wait, what? Ethan stared at the phone. You're in the meeting right now. I stepped out when I got the call, Dr. Holland replied. They insisted I remain connected. They're listening as we speak. Twist delivered. What had begun as a father checking on his sons had escalated into a live recorded government incident. One wrong word from airline personnel. And they weren't just risking bad PR, they were risking federal audits. From 3A, the older gentleman who had whispered doubt earlier now sat ramrod straight eyes forward, lips tight. A woman in 4B quietly removed her earbuds. The atmosphere shifted again. Ethan spoke clearly for all to hear. We were told we didn't look like we belonged in these seats. We were denied phone calls, access to Wi-Fi, and nearly restrained. Dr. Holland's tone changed. No longer just CEO or father. Now strategist Cheryl Gates, Ron Walters, officer Samuel Moore. All names have been logged. Statements from passengers will be collected. Audio from this call is being archived under FAA Protocol 5.6.3 on discrimination documentation. Grayson, the legal counsel, nodded slowly. He didn't need to speak. He knew the system was already moving in their favor. Dr. Holland went on. To those of you listening who had a hand in this, you've now involved not just my company, but multiple federal departments. You will answer to more than internal review boards. Cheryl shifted uncomfortably. Moore turned toward the front of the plane, pretending to check his radio. Ron hadn't returned. Elijah moved the phone closer to the mic. Dad, the stream's live again. Thousands are watching. Good. Dr. Holland said, let them. Let the country see what happens when children of color are treated like threats simply for flying with dignity. The comments were exploding. Holy hell, this dad is a boss. Dr. Holland said, receipts, consequences, and congressional connections. This is bigger than a flight now. Skyline Airlines is done. The view count passed 7,800. And then something else happened. A flight attendant, not the one who had helped, approached cautiously. She was trembling slightly, but she held out a piece of paper. Ethan took it. It was a handwritten note. Dr. Holland, Secretary Owens requests confirmation. Will you provide full incident debrief by end-of-day recordings will be submitted for legislative review. Beneath it, a private FAA staff signature and timestamp. The government was watching and asking for help. Elijah turned to the camera. Our father is speaking to the government right now, using this moment to change something bigger. He turned the screen toward Ethan, who looked directly into the lens. Dignity isn't a luxury seat. It's a birthright. Dr. Holland's voice returned. Sons, I'll stay on the line. But I want you to know, no matter how this ends today, you've already changed the conversation. The cabin was silent. Not one cough, not one phone buzz, just awe and tension, and a feeling that the world had just tilted on its axis. The phone on Ethan's tray table still sat on speaker, Dr. Holland's voice, ringing through the first-class cabin like a courtroom statement delivered over clouds. Elijah adjusted the live stream camera, his thumb steady his breath. Not. Viewers, you just heard my father confirmed that this call is being recorded by the Department of Transportation and the FAA. The numbers ticked. 8,300, 900, 10,000 viewers, all watching. Dr. Holland's tone shifted. Cool. Corporate, but with a threat of heat building beneath. Let me now address the commercial ramifications of this incident, since civil rights clearly weren't compelling enough to your staff. Passengers leaned forward. Even Cheryl, now visibly pale, had stopped pretending to reorganize silverware. The Holland Aerospace Systems contract with Skyline Airlines is currently valued at $947 million per year. Dr. Holland stated, "It covers not only full maintenance and mechanical compliance on 73% of your active fleet, but also exclusive avionics upgrade programs, emergency response infrastructure, and onboard system diagnostics. You quite literally cannot take off without us." Gasps from multiple rows. Someone in 4A whispered, "Did he say 900 million?" Dr. Holland continued, never raising his voice, never needing to. Clause 17(4) of our agreement permits immediate termination without financial penalty in the event of a confirmed discrimination incident involving a member of the Holland family or executive class personnel. You are in direct breach as of 10 minutes ago. Moore stepped forward. "I'm shutting this down," he snapped, reaching toward Ethan's phone. Before he could touch it, Elijah stood. "Don't." Moore scowled. "You can't stop me." "I don't have to," Elijah replied. "Your own badge camera is recording this, and so is the FAA. Moore hesitated, but then reached for his radio. "Command, this is Officer Moore, Cabin 1, requesting clearance to cut onboard electronics and terminate all outbound signals, including cockpit." From the front of the plane, Ron's voice rang out. "Turn it all off. Tet Bay." Passengers looked around. A woman clutched her pearls. Someone muttered, "Are we in a movie?" But then another voice entered the chaos. Calm, deep, authoritative. "Negative," said Captain Richard Baer, the pilot of Flight 612, stepping out from the cockpit for the first time. All eyes turned. Captain Baer was in full uniform, his cap tucked under one arm. Gray streaks marked his temples, and his gaze scanned the room with the focus of a man who'd flown through lightning storms and political disasters. He walked directly to Moore. "You will not disable this aircraft's communications," he said. "You will not interfere with a federal investigation, and you most certainly will not touch these passengers." Moore's jaw tightened. "I have orders." "You have ego," Captain Baer replied. "And if you continue down this path, I'll personally file a misconduct report before we even taxi." Silence. Captain Baer turned to the boys. "Gentlemen, I apologize for the behavior you've experienced. You are welcome aboard this flight in your assigned seats. I've been monitoring communications since takeoff prep." Your father's voice was also heard in my cockpit. He turned towards Cheryl. "You can return to your station quietly." Cheryl looked like she wanted to vanish into the cabin walls. Captain Baer returned to the cockpit without another word. Elijah turned back to the camera. "Well, that's what leadership looks like. The live stream viewer count hit 12,000. Far above the aircraft in the glass-towered headquarters of Skyline Airlines in Atlanta. CEO Patricia Williams had just received an urgent text from the FAA liaison sitting in the Department of Transportation's executive suite. "FAA, we're escalating this live stream being archived as evidence. If you don't fix this in the next 30 minutes, your license is next." Patricia dropped her stylus. "Get me Ron now." "He's not answering," her assistant replied. "Neither is Cheryl." "Fine," Patricia said. "Then get me the pilot." Back in the air, Captain Baer's comms headset buzzed. "Captain, this is Patricia Williams, CEO of Skyline Airlines." "Ma'am," he said without emotion, "I've been informed of an incident involving 2 passengers and a series of misunderstandings. Misunderstandings don't involve zip ties, silenced phones, and federal investigations," Baer replied. Patricia paused. "Understood. I'm initiating corrective actions now. Full authority delegated to you." He didn't respond. He didn't need to. Back in first class, Moore finally backed away. Ron had vanished. Cheryl was frozen, and Grayson, the legal counsel, was now quietly making calls of his own. His tablet aglow with emails titled, "Urgent Termination Clause, Invoked FAA Class B Violation Request. Cease and Assist. Discriminatory Protocol. Ethan leaned toward Elijah. This just went nuclear. Elijah nodded. We're not just fixing this flight. No, Ethan said. We're about to fix the whole damn system. And somewhere high above the clouds that system was beginning to fall apart. The Wi-Fi was fully restored. Elijah's phone blinked red again. Live viewers 31,247. Ethan leaned into the camera. To everyone just joining, my brother and I were nearly kicked off this flight because we didn't look like first-class passengers. Even after showing proof, even after being calm, this isn't just about us. This is about what's been happening quietly for too long. The comments flew like wildfire. This stream is historic. Just got here. What airline is this? Tag every journalist you know now. These kids are legends. The number jumped again, 34,790. Behind the scenes at Skyline Airlines headquarters, chaos had taken root. CEO Patricia Williams had watched the feed on 3 different monitors. Her executive team surrounded her phones, buzzing nonstop, legal advisors pacing, and then her direct line rang. It wasn't a board member, it wasn't FAA, it was Dr. Anthony Holland. She picked up. Dr. Holland, I suggest you join the live stream. He said, you owe my sons and every single viewer an apology. Now your airline survival depends on it. Click. Patricia stared at the screen. The twins were calm, composed, articulate, everything she needed to restore the company's image, but words wouldn't be enough. She had to be seen owning the failure. Get me on that stream, she barked. Video now. Elijah's phone buzzed. Incoming call. Patricia Williams, CEO, Skyline Airlines. He glanced at Ethan. Ethan nodded. Answer. He did. Patricia's face appeared on the screen. Professional, polished, her lipstick slightly smudged, like she had run from a crisis room, because she had the screen split between her and the brothers. Hello, she said. My name is Patricia Williams. I'm the CEO of Skyline Airlines. The view count spiked 37,200. I want to begin by offering a personal and public apology to Ethan and Elijah Holland for the egregious treatment they've experienced aboard Flight 612. What happened today does not reflect the values of this company, Ethan cut in. But it does reflect your systems, Patricia hesitated. Yes, she said slowly. And that's why changes are already underway. The flight crew involved is being suspended pending investigation. Officer Moore has been reported to airport security leadership for misconduct, and our internal review of gate protocol has been initiated. Elijah tilted the camera to show Cheryl still in the galley. Is she part of the suspension? Patricia blinked. Yes. And then someone else joined the call, not through Elijah's phone, but on Patricia's internal comm system. A third screen popped up. A gay-haired man in a dark suit seated at a heavy oak desk. His background was lined with airline memorabilia. George Milton, Board of Directors, Skyline Airlines. Patricia, he said, tight-lipped. We need to speak before you proceed. This is not the time, Patricia replied. It is if you're about to sacrifice Cheryl Gates. Ethan and Elijah exchanged a glance. Elijah whispered, Who is that? Patricia didn't answer, but George did. She's my granddaughter. Silence. On the live stream, the comments exploded. What? Nepotism alert. That explains everything. Protecting his own. George leaned forward. Yes, she made mistakes, but she's young. She's worked hard to get here. This doesn't have to end her career. Patricia's voice dropped. George, the entire world is watching. We have over 37,000 viewers right now, and every one of them has seen the footage. We can't spin this. I'm not asking you to spin it. I'm asking you to pause before making any permanent decisions. Let internal review handle it. Ethan spoke clear and firm. You mean let the system protect itself again? George's eyes flicked toward him. Young man, I'm trying to preserve fairness. You mean favoritism? Elijah snapped. The chat exploded. They just exposed a whole protection network. This boy is spitting facts. Skyline about to burn from the inside. Can't unsee this. Patricia closed her eyes for a moment. Then she looked directly into the lens. I'd like to speak plainly not as a CEO, but as a woman who is also a mother. The cabin listened. So did the internet. What happened here is unacceptable. Not because it's a PR crisis, but because it hurt people who did nothing wrong. These boys were targeted. Assumptions were made, and this will have consequences. She turned back to the screen with George. I'm sorry, Mr. Milton, but this isn't a negotiation. Your granddaughter will be held accountable like anyone else. She tapped a tablet on her desk. Effective immediately, Cheryl Gates is terminated from Skyline Airlines. Gasps echoed in the cabin. Cheryl stumbled back into the galley, covering her mouth. The live stream exploded. She said terminated. Finally, accountability. They got receipts power and public support. Skyline board just got wrecked. George's screen disappeared. Patricia faced the camera again. This won't undo the harm, but it's a start. Ethan, Elijah. I hope you'll meet with us publicly and privately to advise on policy reform. We need your voices. Ethan nodded slowly. We'll think about it, Elijah added. Actions speak louder than video calls. Patricia gave a small, solemn smile. Then we'll let our actions speak. The call ended. The cabin burst into quiet applause, not loud or raucous, but reverent, respectful. Elijah looked at Ethan. Did we just win? No, Ethan said. We proved we never had to lose, and the world kept watching. By the time Flight 612 touched down in Chicago, Ethan and Elijah's names were trending on every major social platform in North America. The live stream had reached over 42,000 viewers by its end, and clips were already being re-uploaded to YouTube, analyzed in newsrooms, and posted across global headlines. Black twin brothers calmly expose airline discrimination live. Skyline Airlines issues termination after viral civil rights showdown. Teen flyers hold airline accountable with composure and facts. CNN ran a breaking banner. MSNBC was interviewing aviation policy analysts. Even ESPN reposted the footage under the caption, "This is what grace under pressure looks like." When the boys finally stepped off the plane, escorted not by guards but by the captain himself, they were met not with paparazzi, but with silence and awe from airport staff, many of whom had seen the stream and were quietly rethinking how they viewed passengers' authority and assumptions. Ethan adjusted his backpack and kept his eyes forward. Elijah clutched his phone still warm from the stream, but didn't lift it again. For once, they didn't want to film. They wanted to breathe. Yet the story was far from over. Within hours, Skyline Airlines released a full corporate statement accepting accountability and pledging sweeping reforms. But that wasn't the most surprising part. It was the ripple effect. Delta, United, JetBlue, and American Airlines all released their own public announcements in the next 48 hours. Effective immediately, we are reviewing our internal bias training systems. We stand in solidarity with passengers Ethan and Elijah Holland. Passenger dignity is not negotiable. We are committed to change and transparency. By day 3, Holland Aerospace Systems received a call from the FAA. Dr. Holland took it from his office, surrounded by folders, exhausted but calm. Dr. Holland, we've reviewed the incident and your company's long-standing role in the aviation sector. We'd like to propose a national contract, said the representative. What kind? Dr. Holland asked. A partnership, the voice replied. To design a nationwide employee assessment and bias tracking system across all major U.S. airlines. You've demonstrated not just influence, but integrity. We'd like Holland Aerospace to lead the charge. Twist delivered. Dr. Holland, a man who had long stayed behind the curtain of engineering and operations, was now being asked to help rewire the human systems of aviation. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked one question. Will this program include youth input? Absolutely. Then he smiled. You'll have my proposal by the end of the week. On day 5, Ethan and Elijah were invited to Washington, D.C. An official Senate committee had requested their appearance for a special hearing on discrimination and transportation systems. The invite came signed by 2 Republicans, 1 Democrat, and an independent. It was bipartisan. It was real. Ethan stared at the letter. Elijah looked at him. "We're testifying like in front of Congress." Ethan nodded slowly. "Looks like it." A week later, they stood behind microphones in a marbled hearing room dressed in matching charcoal suits and navy ties. Their father sat behind them. Reporters packed the press section. C-SPAN aired it live. Ethan was first. "My name is Ethan Holland. I'm 16. My brother Elijah and I were passengers on Skyline Flight 612. We were told we didn't belong in first class, not because of anything we did, but because of what we looked like." His voice was steady measured. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't point fingers. He told the truth. We were nearly removed, denied phone calls, had our live stream cut. Officer Moore reached for zip ties. Cheryl Gates said we must have made a mistake even when we showed printed confirmation. Elijah followed. We didn't yell. We didn't fight. We documented. And we kept our cool. Not because we weren't angry, but because our father taught us to fight with facts. The senators leaned forward. Viewers online posted quotes in real time. "Fight with facts. Dignity is not a luxury seat. Calm is not compliance, it's strategy." Elijah continued. "We don't want to just punish a few bad people. We want to help fix the system that gave them that power in the first place." A murmur passed through the room. Senator Laura Whitaker, a seasoned policymaker with a reputation for grilling witnesses, leaned into her mic. "Elijah Ethan, if you had the power to change one thing across the airline industry right now, what would it be?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Accountability that travels at the speed of injustice." The quote went viral before the hearing ended. 3 weeks later, the Holland Protocol was announced. A joint FAA and Department of Transportation initiative led by Holland Aerospace to audit redesign and monitor staff bias in real time. It included anonymous passenger reporting apps, monthly employee ethics assessments, emergency whistleblower hotlines, federal oversight review every 6 months. The system would go live in 2026, and the twins were listed as co-advisors. They weren't just passengers anymore. They were policy shapers. Late one night, weeks after it all began, Elijah stood on the rooftop of their family's home. The city lights of D.C. flickered beyond the horizon. Ethan joined him, handing him a glass of water. "Do you think it'll stick?" Elijah asked. "The change?" Ethan shrugged. "It won't be perfect, but yeah, I think the fear's shifted." "From us to them," Ethan said. "Now they're the ones on camera." They looked up. Somewhere above, a plane traced a silent arc across the sky. For the first time in their lives, they didn't feel like passengers. They felt like pilots. 1 month after the Holland twins stepped off Flight 612, change didn't just trickle. It surged across terminals and tarmacs, airline counters, and corporate headquarters. The ripple of accountability began sweeping through an industry that had long preferred silence over discomfort. The first wave was the launch of Dignity Direct, a real-time bias reporting app developed in collaboration with Holland Aerospace and a team of civil rights technologists. The interface was clean, intuitive, and available in 12 languages. Any passenger on any participating airline could submit a report complete with video, voice memo, or anonymous testimony, and have it routed directly to a centralized compliance center overseen by the Department of Transportation. Within the first 30 days, over 2,000 submissions were logged. Some were minor, rude language, suspicious delays in seating. Others were devastating. Passengers of color being bypassed during upgrades, disabled travelers being ignored, immigrants being questioned twice as often at gates. And for the first time in decades, people felt seen. A CNN headline read, "One app, 2 teens, 1,000 voices unleashed." The second wave came in the form of money, serious money. After facing mounting public pressure, 3 of the nation's top airlines, Skyline, Delta, and United, came together to fund the Holland Equity Fund, pledging a combined $10 million to support underrepresented youth pursuing careers in aviation, aerospace, engineering, and public policy. Applications flooded in. Within weeks, the fund had granted full tuition scholarships to 84 students from marginalized backgrounds. The first recipient, a 17-year-old girl from Mississippi who dreamed of becoming a pilot after watching Elijah and Ethan's live stream from her bedroom. "I didn't know we were allowed to belong in that space," she wrote in her application. "Now I do." Meanwhile, the twins had resumed classes not as viral icons, but as students. Life settled into a new rhythm. Homework interviews, national conference panels, biology exams, Zoom calls with transportation officials. It was overwhelming, but it was theirs. And yet, amid all the structural changes, the headlines, the legislation, the applause, came a letter that quieted them both more than any TV appearance ever had. It arrived in a plain white envelope, handwritten, no return address. The handwriting was careful, old-fashioned. Ethan opened it on a quiet Saturday morning, half expecting it to be fan mail or yet another political endorsement. But it wasn't either. It was something else entirely. "Dear Ethan and Elijah, my name is Thomas R. Jenkins. I was a passenger in first class on Flight 612, Seat 3A. I was the man who whispered that you didn't look like you belonged. I'm writing now to tell you that I was wrong. I want to apologize not just for what I said, but for what I didn't say later, for not standing up, for sitting in my silence while two boys were being stripped of their dignity, one assumption at a time. There's something you should know. I have a daughter. Her name is Grace. She's 19. 2 days before Flight 612, she attempted to take her own life. She survived barely. She told us afterward that she felt invisible, that she no longer believed the world could change, that people cared, that justice existed. She was discharged from the hospital on the day of your flight. She was still fragile, lost. She saw your live stream in real time. I didn't even know she was watching, and she cried not from pain but from hope. She said, "Look, Dad, they didn't scream. They didn't hit. They just stood there and made the truth louder than the lie." Your story helped bring her back to us. I want you to know that. I have since shown her the entire hearing, read every article, and yes, told her what I said on that plane. We cried together, and we decided to change together. Grace has applied to the Holland Equity Fund. She wants to study aviation psychology. She says she wants to make sure the sky feels safe for everyone. From a father who was once blind and a daughter who found light in your storm. Thank you. Yours sincerely, Thomas R. Jenkins. Elijah didn't speak for a long time after reading it. Ethan just sat there blinking fast. "It wasn't supposed to be this deep," Elijah finally whispered. "But it is," Ethan said. "And it always was. We just didn't know who needed it most." That letter never made the news. They didn't post it, didn't tweet it. It stayed pinned inside a drawer of their shared desk. Not because they were hiding it, but because it had already given them more than they could ever give back. It reminded them that systems matter, but so do stories. That policy is power, but people are purpose. And sometimes the loudest reforms begin in the quietest corners on a phone screen in a hospital room with a girl who decided to stay because two boys decided to stand. The ripple had become a wave, and it was only just beginning. The airport terminal looked the same as always. Sleek tile floors, bright fluorescent lights, rolling luggage, and rolling announcements. But for Ethan and Elijah, everything had changed. They weren't flying to speak at a conference or testify before Congress or meet with airline executives. There was no live stream, no press, no cameras. Just a boarding pass, a gate number, and a simple destination home. Flight 924 to Denver now boarding. First-class passengers only. Elijah stood up, slinging his backpack over one shoulder. Ethan followed, nodding to a gate agent who barely looked up from her tablet. They moved forward together, passing through the familiar archway and onto the jet bridge. Inside the aircraft, a flight attendant greeted them with a practiced smile. She was in her late 40s with silvering curls and warm eyes. Her badge read a merit. As they reached the entrance to first class, she stepped to the side, extended her arm with a slight bow, and said softly, "Welcome aboard, Mr. Holland." Mr. Holland. It wasn't sarcastic. It wasn't performative. It was respect. Elijah exchanged a glance with Ethan, who raised an eyebrow and gave a small smile. They took their seats 2A and 2B. Same placement as that day, same layout, but it felt different now. The cabin was quiet, filled mostly with business travelers typing on laptops or dozing beneath blankets. Nothing dramatic, just routine, until a man from seat 3A leaned slightly forward and whispered, "Excuse me, are you those boys?" Ethan turned. "I'm sorry." The man smiled, sheepishly. The twins from the video. The ones who changed the whole industry. Elijah chuckled. "We're just here to fly." Then he added, "But yes, we helped rewrite how people fly." The man grinned. "Well, thank you. I travel a lot. Things feel different now." Ethan nodded. "That's all we hoped for." The flight took off without incident. No stares, no whispers, no supervisors, storming down aisles, just sky stitched with sunlight. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Elijah pulled out his phone not to film, but to check the latest updates from the Department of Transportation. A new banner headline greeted him. Bias Watch officially renamed. Welcome the Holland Protocol. He sat upright. Ethan leaned in. Elijah turned the screen toward him. There it was in bold. The U.S. Department of Transportation today announced the renaming of its Bias and Ethics Accountability Framework. The system formerly known as Bias Watch will now be officially titled the Holland Protocol in honor of Ethan and Elijah Holland's pivotal role in transforming airline passenger rights and industry conduct. The article detailed the scope of the reform, how the protocol now spanned over 140 airports, covering 12 major airlines with monthly reporting requirements, anonymous staff evaluation systems, and nationwide public transparency dashboards. The department's statement closed with, "This is no longer a response to a single incident. It is the foundation for a new culture of respect in American aviation. The Holland Protocol will ensure that what happened to two teenage boys will never happen again, and that every passenger will be treated with dignity regardless of appearance, age, or background." Ethan let out a breath. Elijah stared at the screen for a long time before quietly locking it and sliding it back into his pocket. They didn't need to share it. Not right now. It would be everywhere by morning. Instead, they leaned back into their seats and let the silence of altitude surround them. After a few minutes, the flight attendant returned with water and warm towels. She paused and said, "I was in training when all that happened. The flight, the live stream, the reforms. We study your story now. Every new hire does." Ethan smiled. "Glad it helped." "No," she said, her voice cracking just slightly. "It changed me." She walked away. Elijah closed his eyes, and for the first time since Flight 612, he didn't feel like he was on edge or on guard or under watch. He just felt airborne. Back on the ground in a brightly lit government office, a brass plaque was mounted on the wall of the Department of Transportation. It read the Holland Protocol S 2025 in honor of two boys who chose calm over chaos and truth over silence. In schools, the live stream became part of digital literacy curriculums. In training programs, customer service reps studied the Holland framework alongside emergency protocols. In courtrooms, civil rights lawyers referenced the incident as a new standard in documenting injustice. And in homes across the country, kids watched the footage not for drama, but for direction. How to respond, how to stay steady, how to protect your voice, and how to fight smart. Months later, when Dr. Holland gave the keynote speech at the National Aviation Equity Summit, he didn't speak about contracts or compliance. He spoke about his sons. They didn't scream, he said. They didn't hit back. They didn't crumble. They just stood their ground, and the ground shifted. In the front row, Ethan and Elijah sat side by side, suits a little tighter now, shoulders straighter, futures wide open. They weren't passengers anymore. They were architects. And the sky would never be the same.